G'day. Crazy times we're living in, aren't they? Let's take a break from that and yarn about some pop culture. I'm something of a Trekkie, and by something I mean I like most of the various shows and movies in the Star Trek franchise, but I don't invest anything close to the time some folks do into the fandom. Indeed, it was only recently that, being on isolation due to what turned out to just be a cold, I got round to watching the original series. Going in, I had been told that the show was revolutionary and progressive for its time, but that I'd probably find it a bit dated when viewing it through a modern lens. Fair enough. But I gotta say, that was a gross understatement. Amongst what were genuinely great moments of TV, there was some absolute rot, and a lot of it I honestly feel can't be excused by the fact that it was made in the 60s. Like, for example, the acting.
Lungs filling there again. To see again. Heart pumping, arteries surging, blood again. To feel.
Surely there were some good actors around back then that they could have used. Most startling, though, in my humble opinion, was the way the series treated women. There's a lot of the standard gripes on display here throughout the series run. The female characters wear clothing of questionable practicality, they rarely if ever find themselves in the more important roles, and when they do have an impact on things, it's to do shit like nearly sell out the entire crew because the power of God Dick is just too strong. You know, you gotta watch out for them devious voids, don't you fellas? There are times where it gets much, much worse though. A particularly egregious example comes from Season 1, Episode 5, The Enemy Within, which is notable not just because it contains the inarguable peak of practical special effects. Yes, that is meant to be a newly discovered creature, not a crew member's pet in costume, but also because of what it does to the character of Yeoman Janice Rand. In this episode, there's two versions of Captain Kirk getting around after a transporter malfunction. One is morally good and weak-willed, the other is morally bad and strong. You can tell this is the bad one because he wears eyeliner. The bad Kirk sexually assaults and attempts to rape Yeoman Rand, which, while disturbing, fits the narrative to some extent. However, keep this in mind when you watch this scene, which takes place at the end of the episode after the two Kirks have been shoved back together.
The imposter had some interesting qualities, wouldn't you say? Human.
Holy snap and duck shit. That's the supposedly emotionless and logical Spock throwing some seriously heavy shade. And what's with the human? She seems like mildly perturbed, if that. She was nearly raped, for fuck's sake. Now this example is probably how obviously bad the whole thing got, but the episode I want to discuss in the most depth is the final episode of the show, Season 3, Episode 24, Turnabout Intruder. This is the episode that stuck with me the most, not just because I was at least a little relieved I got through the whole thing, but also because it provided a bit of a diversion from the usual representation of women and actually seemed to be exploring some associated themes. Allow me to summarise. Captain Kirk and the Enterprise head down to a planet at the request of an old flame of Kirk's one, Dr. Janice Lester, the breakup with whom was ostensibly pretty fiery. Wait a second. Another Janice? Did old mate Gene get rejected by a Janice in high school? Any rate, this Janice appears to be pretty ill from an accident that killed most of her team and has sent out the call for help. Kirk and his main posse arrive and attend the scene, and we see a brief exchange between Janice and Kirk, part of which involves her airing her gripes about the fact that she's held down because of her gender, specifically that she can't ever become a Starfleet captain. Kirk, for his part, seems a bit patronising to me, but does agree that the situation is unfair. Soon after, though, Janice pulls a Swiftie and swaps bodies with the Cap using some alien tech that she's found. You see, it turns out that she and her lover, Dr. Coleman, hatched a plan to steal Kirk's body, a plan which saw them murder their own team in order to lure Kirk in. Janice, now as Kirk, intends to kill the Cap, but is stopped by the arrival of Kirk's team, or can't quite bring herself to kill a man she loved or loves, depends on your reading. Anyway, they all get in the ship, and Janice takes command, because Kirk's out cold. The crew, though, notice some changes in the temperament of their captain, namely he now seems pretty irrational, bossy, clipped, and without empathy. Kirk eventually wakes up and manages to convince the ship's senior officers of what's happened, leading to a trial, accusations of treason, and an attempt by Janice to put the senior officers to death. During all of this hubbub, Janice, as those strange voids are wont to do, starts to get real emotional, or as Scotty puts it,
red-faced with hysteria.
these highly unstable feels cause the swap to weaken and eventually reverse. The captain ends up back in his body, and in his infinite wisdom and mercy, he allows a murderer to leave and places her in the care of her co-conspirator, Dr. Coleman the beta male. The episode ends with Kirk giving this speech.
I didn't want to destroy her. I'm sure we all understand that, Captain.
Her life could have been as rich as any woman's. If only... If only...
So, I think it's maybe unfair to say that the episode was trying to send any one message. The script seems a bit all over the place to me, as do many from the series. While it's clearly exploring some themes, I don't think the writers settled on a particular position. That said though, there's a lot that can be read from what they show us. For example, the character of Janice is described as hating her own womanhood, which, well, we don't really see any evidence of that. What she seems to hate is the fact that she's held down because she has 2 X chromosomes, which on its own is reasonable. As well, Kirk, despite acknowledging that shit is shitty, clearly still expects Janice to be happy with her lot. Remember the closing speech about a life as rich as any woman's. Considering this then, I feel like Janice's methods to even the playing field, and especially the mass murder, are kinda just convenient ways to demonise the character who ultimately was pretty right in her assessment of things. Intentional or not, I think the takeaway message ends up being, well, while it might be unfair to women that they're always subordinate to men, it's just the way things are. As well, the women that won't accept the status quo, well, they'll probably steal your place and kill a bunch of people. But don't worry, fellas, they'll be undone in the end because they can't control their hysteria. Which, yikes. Given all of this, I'm pretty glad the whole thing was cancelled when it was, to be frank. The original series was fraught with problems, both of a technical nature and of a nature pretty disgusting, I think even for its time. It shouldn't be written off, of course, there's some great moments. Moreover, I think it has great value in that it provided the building blocks for some truly special projects down the line. Credit where it's due, but criticism where it's due as well, and there's heaps to be doled out here. Anyway, this is one where I'd love to hear others' thoughts, especially dissenting opinions from those who wish to respectfully disagree. Damn it Jim, I'm not a doctor, nor am I an expert on Star Trek. I'm very open to other perspectives here. But yeah, laters.